From atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West, you are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, continues now. This is the broadcast for July the 14th in the year of our Lord 2025, hour 2 at 2, promoting God, family, country, protecting life, liberty, and property, rejecting revolution unless it's a Jesus revolution. Then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. Lowell Nelson, campaignforliberty.org, back with me. Welcome to the broadcast. Hope you had a wonderful weekend, sir.
Sure did, Sam. Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
So there's so much to cover, so little time. Let's start out with some great Utah news, shall we?
Let's do. Dr. Kirk Moore, charges against him have been dropped. He was being prosecuted by the federal government, and in fact, he'd endured a week of trial so far. I think on Monday they selected the jury. Tuesday through Friday, the prosecution put on its case, and then Saturday, out comes U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi and announced that the government was dropping all charges against Dr. Kirk Moore here in Utah. She wrote this on X, quote, "Dr. Moore gave his patients a choice when the federal government refused to do so. He did not deserve the years in prison he was facing," end of quote. Now, of course, Sam, this is a big relief to Dr. Moore and his family and supporters. I know that numerous supporters of Dr. Moore throughout Utah and even around the nation. RFK Jr. knew about him and tweeted about him, said he shouldn't be locked up for doing what he did by protecting his patients and so forth. And so the news is pretty much, nationwide, countrywide, as far as I know. Anyway, supporters of Dr. Moore celebrated the news Saturday evening, and many news outlets sought interviews with him. But not everybody was happy about this, of course. Someone responded to Bondi's post with a recitation of the charges against Dr. Moore and the reasons he should stand trial, writing, quote, "Destroying government-provided vaccines valued at over $28,000 and falsifying vaccine records violated federal regulations, as these actions obstructed the government's ability to track and ensure public health compliance during a declared pandemic emergency. The vaccines were federal property, and their destruction constituted theft or misuse under federal law. Moore's actions deprived the government of resources allocated for public health, potentially endangering community immunity efforts. His actions directly interfered with a federally funded program, issuing 1,937 fraudulent vaccination cards, misrepresented individuals' immunization status, violating laws governing medical documentation, for example, 18 U.S.C. 1001. This not only compromised public health data, but also posed risks to others, as unvaccinated individuals could unknowingly spread COVID-19 in settings requiring proof of vaccination. Dr. Moore faced federal charges for allegedly destroying thousands of COVID-19 vaccine vials, issuing vaccine cards without administering shots, and giving saline injections to children to bypass vaccination requirements, end of quote. Now, I realize, Sam, that's a long quote, but I wanted to provide this recitation of charges to give our listeners the government's perspective of the issue. I mean, those who are out to prosecute Dr. Moore, that's their perspective. Now, here is the issue from the perspective of those who supported Dr. Moore. Quote, "Moore was a courageous hero to save his patients from taking experimental injections and risking possible injury or death. He upheld a higher law and the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. The viral weaponized mRNA gene therapy injection, or the kill shot as I like to call it, has caused numerous dangerous symptoms of blood clots, long COVID, myocarditis, etc. The outcome of this case will have national and international implications. From 2020 to 2022, Dr. Moore treated 800 to 1,000 patients for free with ivermectin, and hydroxychloroquine, helping families preserve their jobs, education, and medical autonomy. The federal government's case is seen by supporters as an effort to silence dissent against COVID-19 policies, end of quote. So, Sam, I'm glad that the government dropped the case, but I do have some questions.
Yeah, so in a short clip, I know Pam Bondi's taking a beating right now, but in this case, she did a good job, and I want to give a shout-out to her. Thank you very much. You did the right thing. So, again, I don't pick people, I pick principles, and she's right on this one and deserves credit, Lowell.
Okay, so I have a friend who was talking to me about this case, Sam, and he said what Dr. Moore did was lie, right? He was being dishonest.
Nope, false. Let me tell you who lied and who was dishonest. Tell me where in the Constitution vaccines are listed under general government responsibilities.
Zero.
So first off, the general government has no authority to make vaccinations in the first place. They have no mandate, they have no authority, they have no jurisdiction. You show me where in the Constitution the government can make murder medication, experimental murder medication, and then we'll talk about who's lying. So the government lied. They created fake COVID medication because it's really, they say it was a vaccine, but it's really an mRNA experimental shot. It's gene therapy. It's not a vaccine in the traditional sense of the word. So then the government lied and said it was a vaccine. The government kind of manipulated and said it was approved, even though it was kind of temporarily approved on this experimental status. Okay, where does all that come from? The Constitution grants no authority for any of that. So when we say the government created it, they stole our money to create it. So whose is it? If they stole my money to create something they had no authority to create, whose vaccine is it? It's the people's vaccine. So the doctor got the people's vaccine and said, hey, some of these people don't want to take the vaccine they paid for. Therefore, they don't have to take the vaccine they paid for. If they want to flush it down the toilet or dispose of it in some other way and take saline or whatever else, they can do whatever they want to. They have their physical body autonomy. Furthermore, then, when you say you put out fake vaccine cards, no. It said these people what? What do the vaccine cards say? That you took the vaccine? Or does it say you have immunity? What do the vaccine cards actually say?
Yeah, no idea. I have no idea.
All right. So here's the point. If I have to create a false card because they're trying to violate my body and give me a kill shot, they're trying to deliver murder medication to me, and I reject that murder medication, and I create a fake card. It reminds me of the little kid that's so hungry he steals. Is he really guilty of stealing, Lowell? Or is he so hungry you forgive that moral mishap because you say the greater moral cause, this poor kid's going to starve, or he feels like he's, to the point where we got to set aside that thing. Hey, kid, don't steal anymore. We got to teach you that. In the meantime, let's get you some food. There's a greater moral imperative. And the greater moral imperative that the doctor's focusing on here, remember, there's a hierarchy of morals. And the first moral is, hey, if you're a doctor, don't give people kill shots. And when you give people kill shots, hey, that's a moral meltdown. And so when people don't want the kill shots and they say, I don't want this, I know that it's not good for me, and they choose, and then that doctor supports that, first do no harm, and the doctor supports that, how is that the only people lying and forcing people? We don't believe in force in America either, okay? I thought women should be running around going, it's my body. Okay, fine. Let's use that against them for a quick second and say, hey, when the government's that out of line, I look at this doctor as a hero protecting Americans from the kill shot. And you say, well, Sam, it's not a kill shot. That's not been proven. Okay, you go find out how many people died from the vaccines versus how many people died without them. And you'll quickly find out worldwide more people died from the vaccines. And people are still dying from the vaccines. And people have had physical harm from vaccines, so much so that in 1986, Ronald Reagan put together what they call the Vaccine Injury Compensation Fund. Why? Because there was so many injuries and death from vaccines that the vaccine companies that made these toxins, they were going to go under because they couldn't afford all the liabilities. And so the government took on the liability and made the taxpayer pay for the liability. Go look it up. It's 1986, signed by Ronald Reagan, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Fund, and you'll see that it's paid out literally billions of dollars for when vaccines go wrong. So you can debate if it's a kill shot or not, but if it's not, then quit making taxpayers pay for it with this government mandate. Let the vaccine people take the responsibility themselves, and you'll find out quickly they'll all go under because the vaccines are dangerous. And the vaccines harm and kill and destroy. And so this kill shot's not an exaggeration. And so this doctor's really protecting the citizen from his government. And the government's the out-of-control liars, and they've got to be stopped. And thank heavens for this doctor giving people a choice. And that's exactly what Pam Bondi said. Hey, this doctor gave others a choice when the government would not. Oh, don't we believe in choice and agency, people? So I defend the doctor 100%, and I commend Pam Bondi for protecting him. And I think the guy's an absolute American hero, sir.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you.
Go ahead and skip the break
Sam.
and respond, Lowell.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Sam, totally. And I hope that my friend is listening to this show so that they got to hear your perspective on this, because I share that perspective. If the government is out to kill me, then I will, lie, cheat, and steal to protect myself and my family, right? If I need to. And that the definition of lie, cheat, and steal, of course, is based on the fallacious law that they put in place in the first place, right? I mean, if they, in a criminal way, impose some standard or impose some law on the country or upon individuals, then we have a duty, not only a right, but a duty to oppose that law if it's not constitutional. And
let me ask your friend a quick question publicly on the because I don't know who the friend is, so I'm not attacking anybody personally. But let me ask a question. Let's say that the government came to your friend and said, "Hey, you need to give your wife a shot that will kill her, and you got to do this." The government said so, but you as a person have the ability when you go into the bathroom to fill the syringe. Let's just say you have the opportunity to fill it with something that will not harm her, or the kill medication. Do you choose to fill it with something to not harm her and give her the shot? Or do you just give her the kill shot because the government says so? I want an answer to that question to this person, because I would absolutely take the pro-life way, take the protection of life way, even though you could claim I'm being dishonest. I don't think so. I believe I'm being completely honest about pro-life, and this person doesn't deserve to die. And honesty says I'm going to preserve their life. Now, you can say that, oh, you deceived the government. You needed to carry out the government's mandate. And I don't think so. The government has no authority to put a mandate like that in place in the first place. And the government has no authority to force me to deliver it and force them to experience the death that will result. And so, what do you do in those kind of situations? You got to have a discussion about a priority of morals, right? At that point, and say, I know that I'm putting this fake, serum in this vaccine shot, but I'm going to preserve someone's life in the process. To me, it's a no-brainer to do, and I think it's the honest thing to do, Lowell.
Yeah,
you're being honest with your God and honest with your morals, not caving to some tyrannical thugocracy. It's kind of like, would you hide the Jews? Yes, I would.
Absolutely.
Darn right, I would. Well, it's not being honest. There, you're dishonest. You're hiding people when the government wants to murder them. You need to go ahead and deliver them to the murder machine. No, I do not. Let's talk about moral imperatives in these discussions. And so, anyway, I find it interesting that people even can debate against the doctor. It's shocking to me. Lowell?
Well, this friend of mine is a medical doctor, believe it or not. So he has this background, I guess.
Well, what about the do no harm from the creed of the doctors then? What about that? Does that apply?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. Apparently inculcated in all of his training and education over the years, he apparently is this idea that if the government makes a law, you have to obey the law, and
But there was no law. Hold on, there was no law. Where did Congress pass a law and say you have to, as a doctor, give a murder medication to a patient?
Right. And so this policy, and in fact that gets to my other point that I'm glad we're making here, Sam, is that this policy of vaccination was not a law passed by Congress. It was just a policy decision, basically that Fauci came up with, and the government said, okay, we're gonna make this the policy, and because we're in an emergency situation. But my point is that Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution says all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. All legislative powers. That means nobody else can make up the rules, right? The judiciary can't make them up.
That's on the general level. Yeah, each state has the same reality in their state constitutions, though, and I don't know of any state legislative bodies that passed a law either. They were just edicts from Fauci and then carried out by mandates by governors, and none of that has the legal reality of law whatsoever, and that's part of the problem here. That's why we're saying the government's acting rogue and must be stopped. And thank heavens for this honest doctor who found a way to stop the government from abusing people. Good for him.
Yeah, amen, brother. Now, I have another friend who said that she knows of a doctor who did the same thing as Dr. Kirk Moore, but he is in prison. And I never knew about this till yesterday, but I found that very interesting, and so I asked my friend, well, give me his name. Maybe we can rally support for him and get him out of prison, right? So, I mean,
Amen.
This could cascade into something beneficial to any other doctors or practitioners.
Because all you have to do is get that to Pam Bondi and say, hey, this guy's in a similar situation, except he's already been abused. Hey, release him from prison. You could get Donald Trump and Pam Bondi to do what they did to the J6ers and just release this guy and call him a hero. It should be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're in full agreement on that, Sam. I appreciate the discussion and appreciate your perspective on it. I think it's the right perspective. It's the moral perspective, and that's what we need more of. We need more moral and righteous decision-making in government and in our society, right? I mean, who said that a nation that is without morals has a multiplicity of laws or something? Like a multiplicity of laws is an indication that the society has decayed morally.
Yeah, because if you're a moral society, the 10 commandments of God Almighty plus the 2 great commandments, love the Lord thy God and love thy neighbor as thyself, you take those 12 guidelines, and it really covers everything for a good, honest, moral people. It covers nothing for those who have no respect for law and for an immoral people, that's for sure. All I can tell you is there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's something that's very serious indeed. And I call the general topic Lowell murder medication, whether it be these shots or whatever, whether it be abortion drugs being shipped across state lines. Again, the general government acting immoral against states that have outlawed this, but the post office still shipping these brown envelopes in secret to these women to murder their children in their own homes and stuff. This whole class of this is called, in my mind, murder medication.
Well, I like that characterization. I think it's very appropriate, Sam. Unfortunately, that it's going on, but we need to call it what it is. And if we call it right to choice, that's not the correct definition. Murder medication is much more appropriate definition of what's going on there.
All right, Benjamin Netanyahu, in my opinion, is a war criminal. He's been coming to the United States over and over and over. Last time he came, time before this last time, applauded by Congress, promoted by Congress. Now he's coming to Donald Trump asking for money and support. Netanyahu says Donald Trump needs to get the peace prize. But you know what? Ron Paul really is speaking out boldly, and good for him, explaining what Trump should tell Netanyahu instead of promoting Ukraine and sending missiles to the Ukraine and promoting war. Donald Trump used to say it's not our war. Now he's doing exactly what Biden's doing, sending missiles over there, attacking Russia, being partner in this war. It's a disgrace. He pretends that NATO will pay for it and that we won't, but don't we fund NATO? So it's a big dishonest lie. But Ron Paul's got some advice for Donald Trump, and I pray Donald listens, Lowell.
Yeah, he would urge President Trump to make a deal with Iran that would satisfy his stated goal of no nuclear weapons production, and that would also allow Iran to continue its lawful pursuit of civilian nuclear energy.
But let me stop you there, though, and just make a point. I agree with Ron on this. However, it's lawful if they create a nuclear weapon, too.
Yeah, I agree, Sam.
And if you say it's not lawful, my response would be according to whose laws? Well, by golly, the law of nations, by NATO's laws, or by the UN laws. Those aren't laws. They violate the sovereignty of nations. And they shouldn't violate our sovereignty, and they shouldn't violate the sovereignty of Iran. Now you say, Sam, why are you picking Iran's side? I'm not picking anybody's side. I'm just talking about moral principle here. Where do you get the right to determine internationally you can just create a law, whether they agree to it or not, that forces them to do certain things? So it's okay for Israel to have a nuke. It's okay for us to have a nuke. It's okay for Russia, China, North Korea to have a nuke. But no, you guys can't have a nuke. Why? Because we said so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
isn't that the wolves in charge of the hen house kind of thing? I mean, it's insanity.
Yeah, it is, Sam, and it's hypocritical to allow China and Russia to have nukes and North Korea to have nukes, right? But now we're not going to allow Iran to have nukes, right?
So, I support the peaceful use of this nuclear capability. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that at what point when we say lawful for peaceful use, as if the other kind of use is unlawful, look, they can use uranium for whatever they want to. And we got to ask ourselves a real fundamental question. Where do they keep getting this ability to continue to develop this anyway? Answer, from our most favored nation trading partner, China, or possibly Russia, or possibly North Korea. And we've got basketball players hanging out in North Korea and everything else while we complain that, they shouldn't have the right to do this. Well, who's breaking the law? Just Iran? Well, what about it's the people that made the law or people that claim they hold to the law that are breaking it. We're arming and training and funding wars and sending weapons everywhere. And so anyway, I just find this interesting. I don't mean to derail from Ron Paul's column and from what he's saying Trump should tell Netanyahu, because I think Ron Paul's right. I'm just making a broader point about, where do we get off thinking we decide for everybody and everything? And this blowback, this hatred for that is eventually going to be the United States' downfall if we're not very careful, Lowell.
Yeah, well, I'll take one other digression, Sam, and just point out that in 1992, Iran bought 4 nukes from Kazakhstan, right? Then they reverse engineered them, started building their own a couple of decades later. And so people will say that if Iran got nuclear weapons, then all heck would break out in the Middle East, right? Well, this proves that that's not the case. They've had nukes for, what is it now, 30 years, over 30 years, Sam. Have they attacked anybody with a nuclear bomb? Have they set any nukes off? No, the answer is no. And so they have demonstrated restraint when it comes to nuclear weapons. And it was Dr. Peter Pry, who served as executive director of the task force on national homeland security, right, way back in 2016, that pointed this out. Iran has had nuclear weapons since 1992. And so it's fallacious to say that, they have no restraint. If they had a nuke, they'd blow everybody up in the Middle East. It's more than
it's propaganda. It's flat-out propaganda, Lowell.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay, so getting back to Ron Paul's column now. So what Ron Paul is recommending to Trump is that basically a win-win deal, and that is allow Iran to, go ahead and pursue civilian nuclear energy, and but not the nuclear weapons production, right? That's a win-win, and in fact, that would resemble the JCPOA deal that Obama did, but which Trump revoked in his first term of office. And it could have avoided a costly and counterproductive war with Iran. But negotiations were cut short, as we know, when Israel made a sneak attack on Iran, which led to the 12-day war that did not turn out the way Israel wanted. Iran was more than capable of defending itself and then of sending missiles back into Israel, so Netanyahu had to call on good old Uncle Sam for help. Now, one other digression I want to make here from the Ron Paul column, Sam, is this. I was listening to another podcast where the guest, I think it was the Tom Woods podcast, the guest was saying that probably what happened was that Trump was negotiating and scheduling negotiations with Iran. And Netanyahu, by himself, without Trump's complicity, attacked Iran. Bombed Iran. And then when Iran shot back and Israel found themselves under attack, that's when they reached out to Trump and said, help us, save us, please, help us. And so that's when Trump, bombed Iran and then said, okay, you two, knock it off. We're going to stop right here and we're going to end this war.
Well, and Trump said we had a ceasefire a month ago, but isn't he still trying to negotiate a ceasefire right now?
Yeah, I think the ceasefire is in effect right now over there.
I don't think so. I think they're trying to work on one.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, ceasefires in these places that have been fighting for thousands of years are tenuous at best. Let's be clear about that. I don't even know if we have one or not. I'll have to research it. But I think that they're trying to work on one, so I don't think we have one. In fact, I think they just said a bunch of kids got murdered, and it was all an error. They're so sorry it was a technical glitch. Hang tight. Lowell Nelson, Campaign for Liberty on Liberty Roundtable Live.
How would you like to help this program reach more people and earn silver at the same time? Call or text 801-669-2211 for complete details.
Breaking news this hour from townhall.com. I'm Greg Clugston in Washington. 9 people have died in a fire at an assisted living facility in Fall River, Massachusetts. Firefighters were able to rescue many occupants, but several residents did not survive the flames and heavy smoke. U.S. and European leaders are meeting this week to discuss Russia's war against Ukraine. The talks come as President Trump calls out Russia's Vladimir Putin for relentless attacks on Ukrainian civilians.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is set to meet with President Trump and other U.S. officials this week in Washington, while the U.S. envoy, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, is visiting Kyiv. The president has teased what he calls a major announcement on Russia. Arriving from New Jersey at Joint Base Andrews on Sunday, President Trump expressed frustration with Russian leader Vladimir Putin.
I thought he was somebody that meant what he said, and he'll talk so beautifully, and then he'll bomb people at night. We don't like that.
As Ukraine struggles to intercept overnight air assaults, President Trump says the U.S. will sell weaponry to NATO allies that they can then pass on to Ukraine. Jennifer King, Washington.
A wildfire destroyed an historic lodge and dozens of other structures on the Grand Canyon's north rim, forcing that area to be closed for the rest of the season. There were no injuries. As the search for missing victims of the July 4th flooding in Texas continues, volunteers are helping move debris and clean up. Murray Van Gundy is with Kerrville Bible Church.
One of our members of our church, their house flooded up in Hunt, and so we spent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday cleaning their house out, and they were able to salvage the structure of it, ripped all the drywall out of the ceilings, out of the walls. They had 3 feet of mud throughout the whole house. It reached 10 feet in their house, but thankfully they got out safe.
At least 132 people killed in the flood. More at townhall.com.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. I've been thinking, why does it feel like losing weight is harder than ever before? With mixed messages, fad diets, the quick fix injections, even magic coffee. I mean, it's overwhelming. Most people are exhausted trying to fight a battle they cannot win. If you feel this way, trust me, you're not alone. I used to feel that way too. But let me tell you, it's not your fault. Your body is working against you, and the longer you wait, the harder it gets. Do what I did. I called PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition 3 years ago. I lost 53 pounds. I feel terrific, and I've kept the weight off. Make the phone call that can change your life the way it has changed mine. They won't let you fail. Call 855-696-2020. That's 855-696-2020 to schedule your consultation. The first 11 callers who mention the word healthy will get 2 free weeks added to their weight loss package. Call now, 855-696-2020. Mention the keyword healthy to get 2 free weeks, or visit them at myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com.
Attention collectors and savvy investors. We are excited to announce a momentous evolution in our journey. Introducing Free Water Coin Company, formerly known as Rust Coin and Gift. This rebranding takes us back to the very roots of where it all began, Freewater, Oregon. It's a tribute to the legacy of Al Rust and a celebration of 3 generations of dedication to excellence in the world of coins and precious gifts. Al, Brian, and Jake Rust standing strong through 64 years of service. Discover a world of exceptional service at Freewater Coin Company, your premier destination for genuine, honest money and precious gifts. Under Brian's expert guidance, Freewater Coin Company, building on the legacy of Rust Coin and Gift, continues its tradition of trust and excellence. Visit us at our Provo, Utah location. Explore our treasures online at freewatercoinco.com or call us at 801-377-1574. Freewater Coin Company, where your future is built one honest coin at a time.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement, how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at CSPOA.org. That's CSPOA.org.
live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Great to have you here on Liberty RoundTable Live this morning. This is Lowell Nelson, riding shotgun this morning with your host, Sam Bushman. We've been talking about this excellent column by Ron Paul, what Trump should be telling Netanyahu. And we took a couple of digressions. We last mentioned the killing that's going on over in the Middle East. I went to antiwar.com during the break to get the latest. And it is true that Israel has been killing people, but not in Iran. Apparently, there's no new killing in Iran. That's apparently the case. But Israel has been killing Gazans. Killed 134 Gazans over the last 24 hours, and we may get to more of that news a little bit later. But certainly, way too much violence going on. And so, returning to the column by Ron Paul, he points out, he makes a very good point here. He says the resulting U.S. bombing run on Iran's nuclear sites did not lead to the end of that country's capabilities, but to the expulsion of the UN monitoring organization and the emergence of Iranian strategic ambiguity regarding its program. In short, the bombing has blinded the world to what Iran may do in the future. That is not a win for Trump, end of quote. So, what Trump should have told Netanyahu, who visited Trump for the third time this year, by the way, last week, what Ron Paul recommends is tough love. He should make clear to Netanyahu that U.S. support does Israel no favors, right? Our continuing to spend tens of billions of dollars a year financing Israel's war machine and backing up Israel's attacks on its neighbors has not produced peace or security, much less prosperity for Israel. End of quote. Right, I mean, this is the point. It's a really great point. Because we've been supporting Israel militarily, Israel has been emboldened to attack its neighbors. And by doing that, they don't make any friends doing that. They just make enemies. And so they don't have peace, they don't have security, and they certainly don't have prosperity.
If you wonder why Iran wants a nuke, this is why, though. If, hey, Israel attacks you and Israel attacks people and different things, and you feel threatened, then you're going to want to say, hey, I got to, it's like the average lady. She probably doesn't have a gun. But pretty soon, if she's threatened to be raped and if this and that, and she hears about all these different abuses and killings and rapes and kidnappings, pretty soon she's going to be like, I need to get a gun.
Yeah.
You don't blame her, right? Well, that's really the same thing going on here. Nations really like people in that sense. Hey, if they feel threatened, they're going to want to have some protection. Weapons are the only way to protect themselves. If they don't feel threatened, they might not be so desirous to press on that button. I mean, pardon that pun, to use that, hey, I got to have a weapon. I got to have a defense mechanism in place. And I don't think people just understand. It's so simple when you really think about it. Why do they want nuclear capabilities? Because it's the only way they can basically say, stop this abuse.
Yeah, right? I agree, Sam. Yeah, and in fact, look what happened, and as evidence that they are suffering from the lack of peace and prosperity. Well, when Netanyahu attacked Iran, the Israelis, they tried to leave Israel, right? The people don't agree with what the government of Israel is doing. They tried to leave, and Tel Aviv forbade its own citizens from leaving the country. They won't even let their own people out of the country, right? And so the Israeli people, they're good people. They don't want war with their neighbors, and they wish that Netanyahu would just go away. I bet if you polled the people of Israel, Sam, and asked them what they think about firing on Iran, I bet maybe 95% of them would say, we don't want it. We don't want to fire on Iran, right? We want peace.
Most people are peaceful and they just want to be left alone. They just want to do their own thing. They want to have happiness. They want to have food and sleep and stability. They want to have work to support their families and be productive in society. People around the world, even though their languages and their customs and things like that are different, really that's what people believe and think. what happens is that we get propagandized about what a whole culture's thinking. We take limited photos of them rioting in the streets when people get murdered and say that's what everybody thinks over there. They're evil, and it's propaganda. 90% of it now. Are some people, doing that in the streets? Yes, they are. But remember, they've been propagandized also to believe certain things, and so we think, oh, the great Satan's over there, therefore we got to act first. We got to kill them before they kill us mentality. We've been propagandized into that, and we've become a warlike people over it for decades. And so, again, we can't be faulting them for when they're propagandized and starting to believe what they've been told. We do the same thing. And so we need to realize that most people are peaceful. It's these power-hungry leaders, these thugs at the top that cause 90% of the problems. Most people just want to be left alone and just want to have a good life. Really, it's true worldwide, Lowell.
Yeah, and Ron Paul makes one other point here. He says, quote, if Israel had to face the hard reality that it must learn to live with its neighbors instead of attacking them, the country may actually start seeing some peace and prosperity. Whatever the case, it is not our responsibility to finance the war machine of any foreign country. It's time to put America first, end of quote. So Ron Paul is right as rain on this, Sam. War really is a lose-lose situation. Nobody wins in war. But peace,
amen.
On the
If
other
President
hand,
Trump should tell Netanyahu, hey, we're not going to spend another U.S. dollar. We don't have it. We're not going to do it. You're not going to shoot people. You're not going to kill people with our money, our weapons. It's not happening. And I know that some of these groups in the past have sworn that they're going to try to wipe Israel off the map. But hey, how much of that's rhetoric versus reality? If they weren't provocateurs and if they weren't attacking, they say just this most recent attack, it's like, oh, there was a malfunction, a mistake, a technical glitch. We didn't mean to. We were trying to get rid of some bad guy leaders, but hey, it just dropped on these little kids and this family is trying to do, I can't remember what they were trying to do, fill water in water buckets or something like that. That's the most recent. Well, it doesn't change the fact that, that creates anger and hatred and fear. Anyway, there you have it. By the way, it's been another incredible week in Washington, writes our buddy Philip Giraldi over at campaignforliberty.org, right, Lowell?
Sure thing, Sam. Now, the title is really not that descriptive, but boy, the content of his column is very solid. He writes this, quote, Americans and others should have the right to criticize how the Israelis wage war without being denounced and criminalized by governments that have been corrupted from the inside, most often by money, but that is exactly what is going on in the U.S. and in select countries in Europe. Watching children being targeted for killing and complaining about it does not make one an anti-Semite, even though the Israeli government exploits that issue precisely as a tool to avoid any consequences for its horrific behavior. End of quote. Well, that's for sure the case. Giraldi mentions the big bad boondoggle bill, of course, is one of the three big things that occurred in Washington, D.C. last week. What was his first comment about the bill? It was this, quote, the government has long exploited alleged foreign threats to national security to boost spending to enhance America's military power, end of quote, right? Because the boondoggle bill increases military spending from $895 billion in fiscal year 2025 to over $1 trillion in fiscal year 2026 because of the additional $150 billion increase in this boondoggle. Well, Sam, the federal debt is now $37 trillion, and this will increase it to about $40 trillion. So that's the biggest boondoggle, or the biggest thing that Giraldi mentions in his column, the first of three. Now, the second one he mentioned is Netanyahu's visit to the White House, which is his third visit this year. What did he want? Well, he wants the U.S. to beat up on Iran some more, of course, and to resupply Israel with more defensive weapons. And it's also during his visit that Netanyahu suggested that Trump get a Nobel Peace Prize. Can you believe that, Sam? Giraldi writes this, quote, possibly the first time when a head of a state that is openly carrying out a genocide plus mass deportations and is about to create concentration camps endorses the country leader who enables the mass murder taking place, end of quote. Wow, just one more criminal to another, eh, Sam? Well, another comedic event, Giraldi.
Well, and the problem is with the one criminal to another, see, we're turning people into criminals, right? Like all that Donald Trump is doing to help Netanyahu and all that, some of these people are doing in Congress, they're literally becoming criminals because they're not following the laws. If we're to go to war, Congress should declare that war. We're literally backing these war crimes, and whether it be Israel and Hamas, whether it be Iran, whether it be Russia and the Ukraine, we seem to be involved in all these things, but yet we haven't declared any war. But yet we literally authorize $1 trillion in this latest bill for war. But yet we're not in a war. This dishonesty, ladies and gentlemen, is turning all these people, in my humble opinion, to which I'm entitled, into war criminals. You can say that's not true, but I don't see how you decide that. Now, we got another week in Washington that's insane. And you look at this and you go, wow, look what we've done. You got Dan Bongino wanting to quit. Kash Patel's in a compromised position. Hey, everybody's saying Bondi goes. They're sick of her, folks. We're sick of these lies.
You know where the solution can be found, Mr. President? In churches, in wedding chapels, in maternity wards across the country and around the world. More babies will mean forward-looking adults, the sort we need to tackle long-term, large-scale problems. American babies in particular are likely going to be wealthier, better educated, and more conservation-minded than children raised in still industrializing countries. As economist Tyler Cowen recently wrote, quote, by having more children, you're making your nation more populous, thus boosting its capacity to solve climate change. The planet does not need for us to think globally and act locally so much as it needs us to think family and act personally. The solution to so many of our problems, at all times and in all places, is to fall in love, get married, and have some kids.
Get ready to be part of something incredible. We're breaking barriers and delivering the powerful stories that mainstream media won't touch. Your support is what fuels our mission to revolutionize journalism and bring you the truth. Join our passionate community of changemakers by donating at libertynewsradio.com today. Together, we're creating the future of news.
Do you know what is great about America? Ask an Immigrant. Ask an Immigrant is a new podcast dedicated to helping Americans, especially our youth, value, appreciate, and be grateful for the freedoms we have here in America. Join host Lydia Wallace-Nuttall as she interviews immigrants from around the world to discover their inspiring personal stories about why they came to America. To learn more about why America is the most prosperous, greatest country in the world, download the Loving Liberty app or go to lovingliberty.net.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We've been talking about war in the Middle East, and there's just so much material to cover. We simply can't cover it in the short time we have together. You just need to go to these websites yourself and get the whole story. RonPaulInstitute.org, LouRockwell.com, CampaignForLiberty.org, antiwar.com. Really great websites. I visit these websites every week, sometimes every day, to get the latest news and information. I listen to Liberty Roundtable because I know I'm getting good stuff here, and I hope you feel the same way. But we need to rush on to another column here, this one by Representative John J. Duncan, Jr. He is a former congressman, and he's talking about the way most Americans feel about foreign wars. And I must say before jumping into this column that I think a lot of Trump's base, the MAGA base, Make America Great Again, people who've supported Trump are feeling very frustrated and dismayed by the way Trump has continued to engage in these foreign conflicts, this foreign interventionism. And but the tide seems to be turning. There seems to be a lot more people against this foreign interventionism, and that's the subject of Representative Duncan's column. It's posted at LouRockwell.com. He begins by saying, look, I'm really not very impressed with members of Congress who seek publicity, generally speaking. And so he really wasn't a fan of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who apparently he thinks is a publicity seeker. But he writes this several days ago, quote, she wrote some words on her X account, which I think expressed the feelings and frustrations of the overwhelming majority of Americans. end of quote. Now, most of the rest of his column is simply a quote from Representative Green's post on X, and I liked it very much too, so I wanted to share it share a part of it with you, the part about foreign interventionism. Now, this quote is probably 3 times as long as what I'm going to quote, but I just love what Representative Green is saying. Quote, I'm 51 years old. I'm Gen X. I've watched our country go to war in foreign lands for foreign causes on behalf of foreign interests for as long as I can remember. I was in 10th grade when Desert Storm started, and my father, before me, was sent to Vietnam, another senseless foreign war. America is $37 trillion in debt, and all of these foreign wars have cost Americans trillions and trillions of dollars that never benefited any American. American troops have been killed and forever torn apart physically and mentally for regime change, foreign wars, and for military-industrial-based profits. I'm sick of it. I can easily say I support nuclear-armed Israel's right to defend themselves, and also say at the same time I don't want to fight or fund nuclear-armed Israel's wars, nor any country for that matter. I'm sick of funding foreign aid and foreign countries and foreign everything. Americans are exhausted by all of this, and rightfully so. I can also support President Trump and his administration on many of the great things they're doing while disagreeing on bombing Iran and getting involved in a hot war that Israel started. That's not disloyalty. Critical thinking and having my own opinions is the most American thing ever. Now, what has been done is done, and Americans can fear Iranian terrorist attacks on our own soil and being dragged in another war by Netanyahu when we weren't even thinking about any of this a week ago. We don't know what the future holds, and I pray for the safety of all people and an end to the constant demand for America to go to war. Enough is enough. End of quote. So hallelujah, Sam. I wish more of our representatives in the U.S. House would talk this way and think this way and behave this way by reducing funding for the military-industrial congressional complex. We should never fight another country's war. Sam?
Amen to that, ladies and gentlemen. And that's really, you can say, well, this is just kind of your opinion, guys. Let's be very clear. Yes, this is our opinion. I agree. But this is, let's make sure people really understand. This is something that the Founding Fathers were very explicit about, meaning that they believed this completely. And they had debates and discussions and statements about this because they were concerned about this in their day as well, Lowell. Let's be, super clear about that, right?
Yeah, and that's also why I'm a big supporter of Defend the Guard Act. I think if legislatures around the country would pass that act, which prohibits the use of the National Guard in active combat without a congressional declaration of war, that would, I think, change. I think that would help turn the tide against these senseless interventions, year after year after year in foreign countries, Sam.
There's no question about it. And folks, we just need to understand. In America, we look to Christ, not government. Okay? And what that means is we need to follow the Prince of Peace. And I know that what we say is we've been propagandized to believe that, we got to attack them in their world and get them before they get us. They're the evil Satan. I don't believe that. The way Americans feel about wars, Americans are propagandized. And so they think that's the only way. If they understood the way the Founding Fathers believed and the way that the scriptures teach, they would think differently on this topic. All right, searching for monsters, Andrew Napolitano. Got to get to this one, man. He quotes John Quincy Adams right out of the gate, Lowell.
America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She might become the dictatress of the world, but she would no longer be the ruler of her own spirit. End of quote. Now, that's what John Quincy Adams said. And what I didn't know, Sam, until last night, was that this statement by John Quincy Adams was part of an address to a joint session of Congress while he was serving as Secretary of State. Now, how often does that happen? I mean, I don't know any day in my lifetime of any Secretary of State asking to address.
Right now, who do we have? Rubio, and he's pushing for more war, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Well, why did Adams make this statement? Well, because the War of 1812 had just ended, and some people thought the British had initiated the war to try to recover the colonies, and some people thought the U.S. had initiated the war to acquire parts of Canada, where most of the war was fought. Well, Adams was worried that the cancer of war was spreading yet again throughout the Washington establishment, and he wanted to squelch it. He did so successfully with his argument that offensive foreign wars don't spread liberty, they spread violence. Now, you may be wondering, dear listener, why I've chosen to talk about this column. Well, it's because, this whole broadcast, we've been talking about war in the Middle East and in the Ukraine, right? We've been talking about we've been talking about the blowback from all of these wars. And here it comes, folks. In 1992, the U.S. was waging another fruitless foreign war, and this one with the CIA and the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, to avoid the statutory requirement of reporting military conflicts to Congress and the constitutional requirement for a declaration of war by Congress. Napolitano is writing about the drug war that the U.S. was waging against Mexican government and Mexican civilians, right? And so it turns out that the Bush administration, the George H.W. Bush administration, decided to kidnap foreigners who had violated American laws elsewhere and hold them accountable here. Wow, did you get that? Foreigners who had violated American laws outside of America. How does that work?
What does American law have to do with it? It doesn't have to do with the people involved and or where they reside or where their actions were committed. But this again is why we become the dictator and the police of the world, and it just backfires. We just get hated everywhere. And I wish Donald Trump realized that. He sounds like at first that he realizes it on the campaign trail and at first, but he's becoming more and more and more the war president. All these wars that we blamed on Biden before, now Trump's starting to have to own them by the decisions that he's making.
That's right. See, the Bush DEA kidnapped a Mexican doctor from his office in Mexico, and then the doctor challenged the action in court. Our Supreme Court ruled that, quote, the kidnapping was lawful because the courts do not concern themselves with how the defendant was brought to the courtroom. They only concern themselves with what happens afterward, end of quote. Boy, that's news to me, Sam. I thought the judiciary was very concerned about how, a defendant is brought to the courtroom. Is he read his rights? Was the due process given, right? I mean, that was, I thought, a big part of it. But Napolitano here is saying... what criminal acts were committed along the way. The list goes on and on and on, right? Yeah. Well, as bad as this policy is, it got worse just 3 years ago, Sam, because in 2022, Congress extended the authority of federal courts to, quote, cover crimes committed in foreign countries against foreign persons or property. End of quote.
Yeah, don't be surprised when other nations start to do that to us then, Lowell.
Yeah.
So pretty soon when your wife's not wearing her hijab or whatever to cover her face, I don't know the right words or whatever her what's that thing called? Veil or whatever. Hijab. Okay, hijab is for a guy. Anyway, then pretty soon they'll arrest your wife and extradite her back to, wherever and say, hey, you're violating Islam. You're, hey. Because it's going to happen in the opposite at some point, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is the blowback. It's coming back to bite us, Sam. The way we are going militarily throughout the world, playing Mr. Policeman and picking up, foreigners for violating American laws, even though they're not even in our country. This is coming back to bite us big time, Sam.
Amen, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to read more about these columns we're talking about, RonPaulInstitute.com or Campaign for Liberty, or RonPaulInstitute.org or CampaignForLiberty.org. Check it out. Doing a phenomenal job as always. Lowell Nelson, everybody. Thank you so much, sir. We the people, along with the grace of the Almighty, need to stand with the Prince of Peace, and that means we must not become a warlike people. Stand for peace, folks, and God save our republic.